Iran launched the largest combined missile and drone attack in history on Saturday against Israel, and now it stands behind an effort to paralyze the global economy. I'll have all the details and analysis about what it means for Israel and the United States coming up on In Focus. It's great to be back in Israel after a couple of weeks in the United States. But while I was away, the Islamic Republic of Iran launched its missile and drone strike against Israel on Saturday. According to the Wall Street Journal write-up of the attack, says that the Israeli military said that the attack included 170 to 180 explosive drones, 120 ballistic missiles, and 30 cruise missiles. Then it goes on, it says ballistic missiles fly steep arched trajectories and generally follow a predetermined path, whereas cruise missiles fly lower and closer to the ground. Okay, the overnight attack was the largest ever in the Middle East, mixing drones and missiles, said Bernard Hudson, a veteran of the Central Intelligence Agency and the agency's former counterterrorism chief. U.S. strikes on Iraq at the start of its 2003 invasion likely involved more cruise missiles, but no drones or ballistic missiles. A few Russian attacks on Ukraine since 2022 invasion were larger in the aggregate, but carried out over a longer period of time than Saturday's strikes, which lasted just a few hours. So we're talking about the largest combined missile and drone attack in history that was carried out on Saturday by Iran against Israel. And notably, the U.S. also claims, the U.S. military, that that the attack that arrived at Israel or was intercepted en route to Israel was actually only half of what Iran deployed, that they shot off. It's just that half of the missiles and drones that they shot off from Iran, that is around 300 or more missiles and drones, either fell detonate or detonated over Iran. There was a big explosion, for instance, in Shiraz of one of the ballistic missiles that exploded short inside of Iranian territory. So half of them were duds, and only the other half came over. So if you look at the 300 that were intercepted over or en route to Israel, then you realize that it was actually 600 that were shot. So this is an even bigger strike than what would on its own be unprecedented in size. So this is a very significant attack. And again, 99% of those missiles and drones were intercepted mainly by Israel either over or outside of Israeli airspace, and also some of them by the United States, and apparently a couple by the Jordanians. And then the British and the French were also involved in intercepting them, and Saudi Arabia played a role as well. So this is all very interesting. A lot of the international coverage has been going on and on and on about the international coalition, and we'll get to that in a second. But first, we have to pay attention to what the strike was. It was unprecedented. Iran has never directly attacked Israel. It built up all of these proxy armies around Israel to attack Israel. The Hamas, the Houthis, Hezbollah, all of the Shiite militias, terrorist organizations that operate in Iraq and Syria have been involved as well in attacking Israel. And so this is the first time, though, that the head of the snake has revealed itself from behind the tall grass. Iran came out and attacked Israel directly. Now, one thing about that, everybody's saying it's in retaliation for an Israeli strike against Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps arch terrorists at the Iranian embassy in Damascus. I've seen a lot of news reports that allege that, this is a tit for tat. So first of all, we have to pay attention to the fact that the Iranian general Zahedi, who was killed along with 6 other top IRGC terrorists in Damascus, was not located in a diplomatic installation. He was located in a building adjacent, apparently, to the Iranian embassy in Damascus, but it wasn't part of the Damascus embassy in any way. He's a military target, which is why there's no diplomatic immunity, because what came out later is that Zahedi, who was directly responsible for all of Iran's terrorist operations in Syria and Iraq and Lebanon, was also the mastermind of the October 7th attack, which paid the American claim that Iran didn't have any direct knowledge of Hamas's October 7th invasion. We knew at the time that it was a preposterous claim that was put out by the Biden administration, but now it's even more clear because we have the name of the Iranian general, Zahedi, who was killed by Israel, who was actually the mastermind of the slaughter of October 7th. So this was a man, as I said in earlier shows, that had literally, rivers of blood on his hands. He was killed. He was not killed in a diplomatic installation. So the tit for tat, if you want to call it that, which of course it isn't, we're in a war, was actually October 7th. This man was responsible for it. He was the architect of the invasion of Israel and the slaughter of Israelis and the kidnapping of Israelis on October 7th. And he got what he had coming to him. And so the Iranian attack on Israel on Saturday can't be seen as some sort of just a response to a lone issue by Israel. We're in a war. And the whole idea that there's a response and a counter-response is just, hiding your head in the sand and not understanding the nature of the war itself. And I just want to add one thing that hasn't gotten a lot of coverage, mainly because it hasn't happened yet. And who knows, maybe it won't happen. But I think it's kind of interesting because I think it's extremely revealing about the nature of the anti-Israel, pro-Hamas protests that we've been seeing all over the United States and Europe, Australia, and other places since October 7th. I want to play you a short clip from a 2-minute video that came out. I was sent it last week by people who were worried because they thought I was going to be flying home to Israel on April 15th. I left actually on the night of April 13th, Saturday night, and I got back last night. But they said, look, you watch out, there may be a problem. So let's just play a bit of this clip about what was planned and may transpire, I don't know, for April 15th.
On April 15th, people across 4 continents will launch an economic blockade in solidarity with Palestine. Through this coordinated mobilization, we will jam up trade choke points and disrupt the global economy. 30 cities and counting have joined the effort. This comes as Yemen is bombed to secure global trade routes and billions of dollars continue to fund the occupation. The time has come to open up new fronts against the Zionist war machine. It's time for collective risk.
Okay, so what did we just see in that clip? We see that there is an organization of what seem to be, the usual suspects, that is Islamist and progressive anti-Israel activists that are planning on blockading ports and other major infrastructure in order to paralyze the international economy on behalf of Hamas. And the idea is you make the nations of the world pay a price for the existence of Israel, because Israel shouldn't exist. It's 75 years of criminality or whatever that Israel even exists, and therefore it has to be wiped out. And the way to wipe it out is to take direct action. In the clip itself, a part that we didn't show because we didn't feel like showing you the whole thing, but they tell the activists, don't talk to the police. We have each other's backs, and we're not going to tell anybody about the nature of what we're doing. So this is, a pretty amazing thing. I don't know how successful it will be as I speak to you. It's very early in the morning on April 15th in the West, and I haven't seen any reports of this being successful. Obviously, if you put something up on the video on the internet, then lots of people are watching it, not just Caroline Glick. And hopefully the people that were watching it that were important were the port authorities and other and law enforcement arms and Interpol and in other places to prevent this from happening ahead of time. But what's interesting about the clip is that the Iranian journalist, this Iranian journalist named Vahid Baheshti, who I'm hopefully going to be having on the show next week, he's an Iranian exile journalist. He lives in exile in London, and he's a human rights activist as well. And he published this on his Twitter feed, this top secret document from the IRGC that I'm just going to read you what he said about it, because it indicates that actually the whole plan to paralyze the economy, to utilize these the Red-Green Alliance of progressive and Islamist activists to attack, to swarm ports and other things, to block traffic in an effort to paralyze the international economy, on behalf of Hamas, on behalf of Iran, is actually an operation. It is the brainchild of the IRGC, of the Revolutionary Guard Corps, which runs Iran. And this is what he wrote about it. He said, "This is a top secret letter by the Deputy Commander-in-Chief and head of the IRGC. It's the IRGC's intelligence organization. It's addressed to the Deputy Cultural and Psychological War Operations of the IRGC, and it's titled Supporting and Encouraging Palestinian Movements Towards the Political Isolation of the Zionist Regime." And in this letter, in this top secret letter between two top officials in the IRGC terror group, they are discussing this Iranian plan. So that means that the whole operation, the whole campaign that's supposed to be carried out by leftists and by Islamists throughout the Western world and in Asia is actually an operation that is directed by and is the brainchild of Tehran. So this is interesting. It's interesting because I think, there have been a lot of fingerprints of Qatar on all of the operations. And Qatar, of course, is Iran's closest Arab ally, about funding. So Qatar has been linked to financing these things. And here we see the IRGC is actually directing them, at least directing this global day of paralysis. So that's important because I think it's a new form of hybrid warfare. Usually when you talk about hybrid warfare, you're thinking of like the Russian operations in Crimea and other places where they sent in the Wagner forces, the Wagner group, mercenaries who work for the Kremlin, and they were wearing civilian clothes, and then they started carrying out military operations. And here you have actual civilians. I mean, some of them may be operatives of the IRGC or other Islamist groups, but they're operating among civilians who are ideologically guided. Some of them may be paid, some not. But these are radical true believers who think that Israel has no right to exist. They're fanatical, and they are wittingly or unwittingly being used by Iran. They're being directed by Iran. Whether they realize that they're actually Iranian agents or not is a question, but that's amazing that Iran thinks that they can wage a sort of war, that they can cripple the global economy by using these Western dupes, or that they have a sufficient number of agents in places like New York or Baltimore or Los Angeles, or they even said Taipei in the video, but across the world, that they have that kind of power, that they're able to motivate masses of leftists, of Islamists from Tehran, directed through all kinds of websites and things. That points to a kind of operation that we haven't seen. And I think that we have to look at the pro-Hamas activists in a completely different way. This is not organic. People talked about the fact that most of the demonstrators on college campuses are foreign students. They're not Americans. And we have to start looking at all of these demonstrations with new eyes when we see that an actual Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps letter between two senior commanders putting out the fact that this is their operation and that they expect it to be carried out by people outside of Iran, acting as activists on behalf of Palestine against the Zionist regime, which they want to delegitimize and destroy, among other things, by placing a stranglehold on the global economy. So that's kind of an amazing thing that Vahid Beheshti has just exposed. I think it really it's something that we have to think about very, very deeply. And now let's just turn for a second to the question of how is Israel responding to this unprecedented attack, and how is the United States responding? Because obviously they're linked together. So I'm not clear on the breakdown of how many of the 300 drones and missiles were intercepted by America and other non-Israeli forces. But I do know that the vast majority of them were intercepted by Israel. Did Israel need American help in intercepting all of these projectiles? I'm sure that it was helpful. Would Israel have been able to intercept them all on its own? I think probably, in the sense that we've been subjected to larger volleys of missiles and rockets and drones from Hamas particularly in the initial weeks of the war, and also in past, and Israel was able to intercept them. And so that's Hamas, Hezbollah as well. And here we had 8 hours of notice prior that we knew that they were coming in and we were tracking them. So was American support necessary? Probably not. It's nice to have had it, and it was very helpful to get the tracking from CENTCOM and from Arab militaries. Apparently, were also involved with it, so that was helpful. But the Americans are hogging all the credit for intercepting all of these missiles and drones. And I'm not certain how vital their assistance was. And again, I'm sure it was very helpful, and the intelligence sharing was very helpful. But I find it really interesting and notable that the Americans seem to be trying to claim most of the credit for the successful defense operation. So that's something to bear in mind. Why are they doing this? Well, they're using it in order to leverage their role in intercepting missiles in order to compel Israel to stand down and not respond to Iran. And here, I think it's really important. A modus operandi here that the United States has been using in the Middle East since October 7th. So Iran and proxies attacked U.S. forces and installations throughout the Middle East after October 7th. I think it was 170 times. Numerous American servicemen and women were wounded with traumatic brain injuries from the incoming missiles that were largely intercepted by Patriot batteries. And 3 U.S. servicemen were killed. Actually, 2, I think, were women and 1 was a man in Jordan a couple of months ago. And so the United States didn't respond offensively to any of those attacks at all. And in fact, it appeared that they had reached some sort of a deal with Tehran, that the Iranians would stop attacking Americans and that the Americans would force Israel to stand down in Gaza. And in fact, after the attacks stopped, there was American pressure on Israel to lower the flames of its counteroffensive in Gaza. So that's on the hand of the Americans, that they used their leverage over Israel to force us to curtail our offensive operations in Gaza in order to receive a reprieve from Iranian proxy attacks on American forces and installations in the region. So the American card that they played there was pressure on Israel. In general, the United States' position, Biden administration's position, has been to defend against attacks by Iran and its proxies, as we saw on April 14th with the attack on Israel. They're very proud of the defensive actions that were taken that intercepted 99% of the incoming projectiles. The United States, and we see it as well with the Houthis, where the United States has launched its counterattack, but it's done it in a way. I mean, it's not a counterattack. All that they will do with their ship in the Red Sea is intercept Houthi cruise missiles en route to ships, en route to Israel, what have you. But they're not actually taking any significant offensive action against the Houthis in Yemen itself. So that it's all just defensive. Let's block you from causing any actual harm. We're going to leave you unharmed where you're operating from, in Yemen or wherever. As far as Israel is concerned, the Americans have placed a line in the sand saying you must not operate against Hezbollah. Here we're sending Amos Hochstein to Israel and Lebanon to try to compel Israel to make strategic concessions to Hezbollah in exchange for quiet on the northern border that they believe should allow Israeli civilians to go back. But of course, we know that would be suicidal on Israel's part, because if you don't diminish Hezbollah's capabilities and their presence right at the border with Israel, along with their rockets and mortars and missiles, and haven't done anything, life can go back to normal under those circumstances in northern Israel. But that's the American plan there too. So intercept the missiles if possible and surrender if necessary, in order to get Hezbollah off your back, but don't diminish Hezbollah's actual power in any significant or strategic way. And we see this with Iran here, right? They're saying, don't respond, Israel, to what Iran just did. Look at how wonderful the interception rate was, and what Biden reportedly said to Prime Minister Netanyahu in their conversation on Saturday night amidst the Iranian assault was, call it a win. Declare victory that you intercepted all of these missiles and let it be done with, but do not launch a counteroffensive, and the United States will not support an Israeli counteroffensive. By the way, I saw, I think it was, I don't remember who it was that argued it, and I apologize, but the United States very quickly said after the attack on Zahedi and all of the other Iranian terrorists in Damascus, the United States immediately washed its hands of it. So we didn't have anything to do with it. We weren't involved. We didn't greenlight an Israeli operation. So I think to a very large degree, that was an invitation to Iran to retaliate against Israel. And then there was a Reuters report that was published by the Jerusalem Post that said that Iran actually coordinated its assault against Israel. It communicated its plans for attacking Israel to Turkey and to, I think, to Saudi Arabia and the UAE, so that they're telling the Arabs, this is what we're planning on doing, knowing full well that they'll communicate those messages to Israel and to the United States. And the United States, according to the Reuters report, greenlighted the Iranian attack against Israel. They said, if you keep it within these parameters, then everything will be fine, and we're not going to let Israel retaliate against you. So the United States was an actor in the Iranian decision-making process, where the Iranians said that they intended to attack Israel. They said what they were planning on doing to Israel. The U.S. effectively green-lighted the attack, and then the United States responded by assisting Israel in intercepting the missiles and the drones en route to Israel, declaring victory and saying, Israel, you're not allowed to respond. This is like a game, right? It sounds like a game. Here's the United States being a referee and being an actor on both sides, one against the other, and all while supposedly having Israel's back, but enabling Iran to strike. And by the way, it's important to note that the interception cost Israel. That operation on Saturday night, the flight hours, we had our entire Air Force in the air to intercept, and we had all of our interceptors operating. It cost Israel billions of dollars. So just one night of operations, because of this reportedly U.S.-approved, green-lighted Iranian attack against Israel, cost Israel, over $1 billion, I think several $1 billion, and it cost Iran a fraction of that. So that's also important to bear in mind. This war is going to be placing Israel in massive, we've already increased our debt to GDP ratio beyond what we had wanted, and it's costing us billions and billions of dollars. So here's a couple more billion, and what the Americans are saying is you're not allowed to retaliate. Now, why is America saying this? Why is the United States so intent on preventing Israel from retaliating against this strike? Well, the obvious answer is because Biden is running for re-election, and he thinks that a regional war would end his chances, if he has any, of getting re-elected. And he's doing everything in his power to prevent that from happening. And so how does he do it? Well, he only plays one card. He doesn't actually put any real pressure on Iran. He puts all of the pressure on Israel. He's putting all the onus for toning things down on Israel. You're not allowed to defeat Hamas. You're not allowed to defeat Hezbollah. You're not allowed to respond to this attack on your territory from Iran. We're going to protect the Houthis from you. You're not allowed to attack the Iranian spy ship that's been directing all of the Houthi attacks, that has imposed an effective maritime blockade on the port of Eilat. We're not going to let you do any of those things. You can absorb strikes and declare victory. Call it a win. That's what Biden said. But we're not going to let you attack in Rafiah. We're going to go against you. We're going to undercut you. We're going to abstain from you and ceasefire resolutions. We're going to conduct political warfare activities against you at the UN, in the international arena, and also at home. I mean, we've had, three ministers who are highly antagonistic to Netanyahu and to his government. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant and War Cabinet Minister Benny Gantz, and then opposition leader Yair Lapid, all invited to Washington officially. No invitation has ever been proffered to Prime Minister Netanyahu to meet with the Biden administration officials at the White House, with Biden at the White House, but all of his major political rivals repeatedly. And then they come back, and at the War Cabinet on Saturday night, after leaking that Gantz and Eisenkot, Gantz's even more dovish party member, number 2, and Gallant, they all supposedly supported counterattacking that night in Iran. It works out that that was a lie that they put out. It's all part of an anti-Netanyahu propaganda campaign where they're trying to present him as weak. Because what actually happened is that they're saying we're not allowed to move without the Americans. We won't support any counterattack against Iran without the Americans. The Americans are, of course, putting the kibosh on that, saying you're not allowed to counterattack. You're not allowed to attack Iran in any way. So really what we're saying is that the United States is protecting Iran. And that's their main goal. They're protecting Iran. They're protecting Iran's proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, from any offensive action by the United States, obviously by Israel here. And Israel is left carrying the bag because we're the ones whose survival is at risk. The United States is destroying its position as a superpower, its credibility as an ally in the eyes of everybody in the region. And they can care or not care. The problem is that Israel's survival is at risk. We saw this on October 7th as graphically as you could possibly see anything. And we saw it very graphically on Saturday. On Saturday, if a red line was crossed or blown up and slaughtered on October 7th, it was crossed very profoundly on Saturday night as well. I mean, here is Iran for the first time attacking Israel in its territory. So fine, they were intercepted, but this is something that is unprecedented, and if left without any response, it's going to happen again, whether from Iran or Iran's proxies in Lebanon, in Iraq, in Syria. They're all threatening it, and they're all actually attacking Israel with missiles. They have been since October 7th. So what are we talking about here? Israel has no deterrence. We have no deterrence from Hamas. Hamas just rejected another negotiating offer from the United States that Israel agreed to, which would have given them, apparently, according to the Americans, everything that they desired in terms of hostage swaps. They rejected it. Why did they reject it? Why wouldn't you reject it? They're sitting in the catbird seat because the Americans are 100% behind them, and they're not harming Iran. And the U.S. insistence that Israel not counterattack against Iran after Saturday night, like their shameful insistence that Israel accept a ceasefire in Gaza and effectively lose the war rather than go into Rafah and finish the job, they're saying to Israel, we want you to just, all you're allowed to do is prevent your own annihilation through defensive actions. But any offensive action that you take is going to expose you and subject you to political warfare, the likes of which you haven't experienced to date, and it's only going to get worse the more you fight. Anytime that you take an action to undermine, to undercut, to degrade the power and the capabilities of your enemies, you can expect to receive U.S. opprobrium and much worse. And we are waging a political war against you in order to overthrow the government, in order to paralyze the prime minister by forcing him to accept the authority and veto power of his political rivals inside of the war cabinet. And we're doing all of this, right in the plain light of day. We're inviting them to Washington without coordinating with it, where we tell them what they have to do in order to overthrow you. That's what they're telling Prime Minister Netanyahu. And then they're enabling Iran to strike Israel, giving a green light to the Iranian strike, saying caught a win because you intercepted. And by the way, hog all of the credit for intercepting the missiles and the drones, even though Israel did most of the work, and the necessity of the American contribution is unclear. So that's what the Americans are doing. Where does that leave Israel? What should Israel do? Well, I mean, this is the biggest problem, right? Because if Israel acts with the United States explicitly saying don't, because Biden says don't, and everybody thinks that he's talking to Iran and its proxies, but the actual fact is that the object of his don't is Israel. Israel is the only one that's ever been deterred by Biden, and in fact, all of his don'ts are there against Israel. Don't go into Rafah. Don't attack Hezbollah in any significant way. Don't attack Iran in any significant way. Instead, accept our demand that you stand down everywhere and allow all of your enemies to survive with at least some of their weapons in the case of Hamas, or all of them in the case of Iran and Hezbollah, intact. That's what Biden is saying, and that places Israel in existential peril. And by the way, thank us, because we saved you at every turn. So their job, their goal, their policy goal here is to transform Israel from a regional power, which we were on October 7th, into a protectorate of America that's considered a rogue protectorate under Netanyahu that has to be restrained and disciplined by the United States, its betters, who know better than Israel what we have to do in order to protect ourselves. We have to be nice and obsequious to the Americans. They found their 3 Israelis who they think will do a job for them, and they're using them against the sitting government in order to block Israel from operating. That's how it looks from here. And then, of course, they use their crowds on the streets to light the country on fire to deter Netanyahu from doing what he apparently needs to do, which is to fire Gantz and Eisenkot and Gallant. But he can't, because he knows that the entire country would be ignited. I mean, I think that this is an untenable situation, because, they're trying in the media here, which follows Biden's signals as well, they're trying to present this as a great victory, just like Biden wants us to take the win, he said, to try to argue what Gantz is arguing, which is, and Gallant, but Gantz said it in a video address yesterday, where he said that we have to operate with a global coalition. But if you operate with a global coalition, this fake global coalition that came out on Saturday night, that means that you don't attack Iran. A global coalition means, Israel, you're allowed to sit in the corner in a state of existential peril, and we'll help you protect yourselves from ballistic missiles and cruise missiles and drones, but you're not allowed to actually take any action against Iran. Iran is immune. They can attack you, but you can't attack them back. Hamas can come in and attack you. It can do what they did on October 7th, but you're not allowed to defeat Hamas. You're allowed to fight a bit. We'll let you do that a little bit, but not much. We're going to demonize you, as Blinken did last week, who said that if Israel carries this out much further, then it's going to become, morally indistinguishable from Hamas. We're gonna castigate you. We're gonna demonize you. We're gonna delegitimize you. We're going to criminalize your sons who are on the front lines being killed to defend the country. We're gonna criminalize them. We're gonna accuse them of war crimes. We're gonna make all kinds of allegations that you're deliberately starving the Gazans. But if we do, but then we're gonna say that it's because of us that you survived, because the U.S. Took down one missile en route to Israel in the south and another, I don't know how many, a couple dozen in the north, and therefore we owe our survival to the United States of America. So this is a sucker's game, and it can't go on. I know that Netanyahu said that there's already a date for going into Rafah. Well, I hope it's soon. And we do have to act against Iran. It's a target-rich environment. We have the capacity to attack many of those targets without any American assistance. I'd like to hope that the United States wouldn't be intercepting Israeli missiles en route to things like Iran's gas platforms and oil platforms. But, never know. After all, they're playing a game on both sides with the Iranians and Israel, with the incoming from Iran. Maybe they'll do the same thing on the other side. I don't really know. But this is not a game that can go on. The United States can be acting as a referee between Israel and Iran for long, because they're not. Iran considers them to be Iran's enemy, and America considers them, and Israel, and of course, is daily attacked and threatened with annihilation from these people. Anyway, those are my thoughts for now, and we'll just have to see how this plays out in the coming days. But this is a very sad time where Israel is exposed to direct attack, apparently with the connivance of the United States, which then turns around and says, we have your back. Our commitment to Israel's security is ironclad. And look, we took out a dozen or so Iranian missiles en route to Israel, and that proves it. And Israel, you better not attack anymore. All right, anyway, so those are my thoughts, and I'll talk to you then in a couple of days. Take care.